Hello. Today we are doing chapter 7 from Never Again Still Means Never Again. Okay, chapter seven's title, Let's Play a Drinking Game. The quote up top, quote, "You ask me what I have done for the women of Germany. My answer is this. In my new army, I have provided you with the finest fathers of children in the whole world." End quote. Outside of a few staged videos, does anyone know if Hitler ever told a joke? Laughed, smiled. I mean, in 800 of the most boring and ludicrous pages ever written, theoretically when he was young, he wrote, not one joke, not one. Hitler, the socialist turned fascist, initially called for, quote, all hands on deck, end quote, so Germany could spread the wealth around and everyone would work for the common good. Well, how did the National Socialist German Workers' Party turn out for German citizens in that respect? I think it's time we all took a little break to digest what you've read so far. I was thinking about making this chapter into a drinking game. Invite some friends over, pass the book around to read out loud, and just have fun. The problem is that every chapter will get you blacked out drunk, with the game premise being one simple question. Was this the truth or a lie that came out of Hitler's mouth? If it's a lie, you have to drink. So, if Hitler says something and it's truth, just sit back, relax, maybe get up from the couch and stretch. But if he's lying, take a shot. You'll never get off that couch. Now, drinking game rules are varied throughout the country. So, I'm not going to suggest how do you do yours. However, I highly suggest you have an ambulance parked in your driveway before starting. There's plenty of documentation on Hitler's beliefs, mainly because he never shuts up about them. Here are his views on various items that most either don't know or think about, since his atrocities trump any topics, and deservedly so. He was a sociopathic perpetual liar, and I assure you, nothing on this list takes away from that. It does highlight different groups and topics of interest that most would be interested in knowing his position on, if only they cared enough to research it on their own. How about his view on Christianity or Catholicism? And if you happen to be a female racist, then you'll just love his views on women. He bet against American women twice in World War II, and I really want to highlight when American women were called upon, they answered. We know that already, just another example of how he was consistently wrong. Yes, if you ascribe to Hitler's ideology, you are following a deluded, dark, and dangerous path. When you read more and more of Hitler's own words, it's utterly shocking that someone would even follow him to the bathroom. As he aged, it seems he swirled further down the toilet, which was no doubt helped by a tremendous amount of drugs. Perhaps this explains his about face on religion, depending on whatever political situation he found himself in. Rest assured, he was really, really mentally deranged, starting in his early to mid 30s onward, and by any metric should have been institutionalized. I have never professed any intelligence on religions, although religions have always fascinated me. By the way, I have yet to find one religion that states anywhere in its literature to kill, maim, or hurt anyone, especially someone from another religion or race. No, it's always some self proclaimed oracle who interprets something in a religion to justify harming others and then somehow finds followers. Please, someone, let me know what religion and what text endorses or states murder of the innocent. Anyway, if even though Hitler's only religion was Hitler, I decided to throw in a few quotes on Christianity. By now, you should know that some form or fashion, Hitler hated everyone, well, with the exception of himself, and also gold teeth. He some way I don't know. He loved gold teeth. Here's a varying smorgasbord into Hitler's life, his religious views, and the disgust and vitriol that you may not know. Christianity. You might be surprised at Hitler's flip flops on Christianity. First, he claimed to be a Christian and continued this subterfuge when convenient, although he actually despised Christianity. How two faced, but are you surprised? Enjoy a drink every time he lies about his beliefs, and you'll probably end up in handcuffs. Some of his quotes or comments, both. Christianity is a rebellion against natural law, a protest against nature. Taken to its extreme logic, here are some of his quotes. Christianity is a rebellion against natural law, a protest against nature. Taken to its logical extreme, Christianity would mean the systematic cultivation of the human failure. Another quote. You see, it's been our misfortune to have the wrong religion. Why didn't we have the religion of the Japanese, who regard sacrifice for the fatherland as the highest good? The Mohammedan religion, too, would have been more compatible to us than Christianity. Next quote. Why did it have to be Christianity with its meekness and flabbiness? Next one. We do not want any other God other than Germany itself. It is essential to have fanatical faith and hope and love in and for Germany. This last quote. He's got plenty more. These are some of the examples. Quote, but Christianity is an invention of sick brains. One could imagine nothing more senseless nor any more indecent way of turning the idea of the Godhead into a mockery. End quote. Next topic, the Catholic conundrum. Hitler, despite turning on Christianity, was a supposed lifelong Catholic and used this affiliation to reel in the Vatican. How strange that the Nazis imprisoned over 2,700 Protestant, Orthodox, and Catholic clergy and sent them to the Dachau concentration camp, and yet the Vatican still played ball with them. The Vatican? It's shocking, but yep, the Vatican, as you'll soon see. As it relates to World War II and the Nazis, I have a problem with the involvement of the Catholic Church. I don't have a problem at all with Catholics or the parishes. However, I do take exceptions to the rat lines. Yes, you heard that right, the rat lines. This system of tunnels and escape routes created for Nazis and other fascists fleeing Europe after World War II, all done in secrecy. They extended mainly to South America, but were also used in Europe to ship these murderers to the United States, Spain, Switzerland, Mexico, and more. These passageway out of Germany and into the various destinations sent criminals and their families into the world with new documents and paperwork for each person. The rat lines also provided money, housing, new jobs, etc. There were two primary routes. The first went from Germany to Spain and then to Argentina. The second was from Germany to Rome to Genoa and then South America. It started in 1942 when Monsignor or Luigi Maglione asked if Argentina would take in Europeans in order to encourage European migration, land ownership, and capital. Great idea. Let's bring in a bunch of psychotic murderers, torturers, and rapists who hadn't been told no in 5 to 10 years to, quote, encourage European migration, end quote. Shouldn't they have been interested in trying, I don't know, a different area in Europe? Encourage European migration? Did that actually come out of someone's mouth? How about just saying this? We were all paid off. Shortly after, a German priest traveled to Portugal and then Argentina, laying the groundwork for future immigration. Okay, the war just ended, and now murderers and evil Nazis were either in encampments, jailed, hiding, or on the run through the rat lines. Now, there were plenty of Nazis who only fought in the war and whose conduct didn't circumvent the Geneva Convention, and we'll give those five guys a pass. Anyone who fits under that simple description should have been allowed to go home or migrate elsewhere, but obviously not war criminals. How did thousands of Nazis committed such heinous acts of torture, starvation, and mass murder simply escape? It was Vatican. From Gustav Wagner to Franz Stangl, former commanders of Sobibor and Treblinka, these psychos were responsible for the deaths of 1 million Jews and helped heinous animals like Adolf Eichmann, Joseph Mengele, Klaus Barbie, and thousands upon thousands more to escape repercussions with the help of the Catholic Church. The Pope at the time was Pope Pius the 12th, XII. I don't know. Many debates have erupted over the years involving did he know or did he not know. Just a few years back, his archives were open with a lot of anticipation, as many believed the answers were somewhere on those pages. My take? My take? Well, of course he knew. The Nazis were rounding up Jews all over Europe, putting them on trains and sending them to concentration camps over the last 5 or 6 years, while the Pope lived in Rome. In 1943, the German occupiers in Italy rounded up 1,100 Jews who lived in a ghetto in Rome. There's a plaque about 800 yards from the St. Peter's Square that reads, quote, on 16 October 1943, Entire Jewish Roman families ripped from their homes by the Nazis were brought here and then deported to concentration camps. Of more than 1,000 persons, only 16 survived. End quote. Pope Pius X, it is now confirmed by documentation, knew about Warsaw. Read the Vanity Fair article titled, quote, Hitler's Pope, end quote. He knew about the 150,000 Jews killed in concentration camps in 1942. And when asked by the United States government to confirm, he lied to the Americans and said, I cannot confirm. The Pope knew they were slated for deportation to a concentration camp. I mean, really? Is this even a question? We know that this Pope was introduced to the Nazis when he was a cardinal in 1933. Furthermore, he spearheaded an agreement between the German Holy See and the Third Reich. By never coming out against the Nazis, Psycho Hitler took it as an affirmation by the Catholic Church. We'll never know the total number, but a tremendous number of Catholic leaders helped the Nazis. In other words, Hitler had killed Catholics, yet the Catholic hierarchy was running interference for the killers. The irony. And people waited 80 years to confirm what was obvious. I mean, pathetic. There's been a lot of great popes, but Pius the 10th, 12th just ain't on that list. Nazis numbering 9,000 made it to South America alone. That's 9,000 murderers, rapists, and war criminals who made it out unscathed and unpunished thanks to the Vatican. And why? Was it for financial gain? Hatred of the Soviets? Anti Semitism? Did they just love fascism? Were they just cowards? Did they get a big lift from Hitler's pseudo Catholicism? I could spend a lot of time going over each guess, but it's pointless now. Priests, bishops, cardinals, archbishop, and a pope. Why? By the way, have you heard the name Edith Stein? Well, here you go. Edith Stein was a Jewish woman who converted to Christianity. She became agnostic in her teenage years and converted due to what she saw in World War I. Later, she was baptized into the Catholic Church. She was a writer and taught at a Catholic school. In August 1942, Edith and 243 other nuns of Jewish converts were sent to Auschwitz and murdered. Edith Stein is canonized as a martyr and saint of the Catholic Church. She is also one of 6 patron saints of Europe. How deluded and messed up could all of those involved be? From picking the victims up at their residence, putting them on a train, offloading them from the train, putting them in line, there are just no words to describe the mentality of these evil men. I mean, 244 nuns? Really? What were they afraid the nuns were going to set up ambushes, put grenades in flower pots? I'm speechless on this one. I hope all you Aryan and Aryan wannabes enjoy being affiliated with the murder of innocent nuns. Great bunch of guys, those Nazis. Hitler's view on women. You know the old saying, quote, I'm not prejudiced, I hate everyone, unquote? Take the female version of that from 1933 to 1945. At least Hitler was consistent. And here are his demeaning views on women. If he wasn't trapping them in the kitchen and demanding they bear Aryan children, he was gaslighting men into military action in order to defend the frail female. I was fortunate enough to grow up with 4 outstanding sisters. Beautiful, smart, tough, sensitive, and hard workers. They never held back on their thoughts and feelings, and you could depend on them for anything. In our house, growing up in general, we were all taught to respect ourselves and each other. It's one of the main things I pride myself on, and it seems that it's becoming a somewhat lost art, as everyone thinks their opinions are beyond reproach. As my sisters turned from girls to teens to women, these qualities never left them. Had they been born in the time of Hitler, such character traits would have been discouraged and diminished, if not snuffed out altogether in the concentration camps. Hitler had no problem devaluing the amazing spectrum of women's abilities, diminishing their role in society and curbing their freedoms. To him, they were a breeding stock and useful idiots. Think Handmaid's Tale. And consider modern day Afghanistan. We had every right to go into Afghanistan to get bin Laden. Unfortunately, we stayed too long, but as soon as we arrived, women and girls, who are all grown up today, received an education and were running for office. They could stay out after 8 p.m., dress fashionably, etc. It was like a week after we left. It was full burqas and no schooling. Certainly, people in this country have no idea what it's like to live under that kind of rule. None. Most people in the free world have no clue. But the women in Germany under Nazi rule certainly did. I assume even Hitler wannabes love their wives, mothers, daughters, aunts, and other women in their lives. So, how can you justify following a misogynist pig named Hitler? Even if you agree with his views on traditional gender roles, how can you turn a blind eye to the control he exerted over women while stripping them of their free will? What about rape? Do you have any idea the amount of rape and encouraged rape the Nazis committed? I mean, they had military units set up for it. It's utterly shocking to me. You, as hate groups, encourage rape. That's certainly a stigma I wouldn't want to put my name behind for others to see. Here are some of his outstanding quotes. Quote, the goal of female education must invariably be future mother. Next one, quote, women's world is her husband, her family, her children, and her home. We do not find it right when she presses into the world of men. Next quote, a woman must be a cute, cuddly, naive little thing, tender, sweet, and stupid. Next quote, the woman has her own battlefield with every child she brings into the world. She fights a battle for the nation. Okay. Last one. If the man's world is said to be the state, his struggle, his readiness to devote his powers to the service of the community, then it may perhaps be said that the woman's is a smaller world. For her world is her husband, her family, her children, and her home. End quote. Okay, the hidden army. If you're still ready to heil Hitler after reading the dumpster fire quotes above, then you deserve a cast iron skillet. Did I say skillet? Cast iron skillet over the noggin, courtesy of your women. It's true that most American women in the 30s and 40s were also confined to gender roles and studies. Think like home ec and typing and stuff like that at school, but not upon pain of death. And unlike Germany, exceptions were made in times of war. Consider our Rosie the Riveter, female defense industry workforce during World War II, courtesy of Pearl Harbor, our declaration of war on Japan, and soon thereafter Germany. This hidden army of American women filled the gap when men left the factories to become soldiers overseas. These women hit the ground running. The Japanese and Germans were well aware of the potential and technological know how of the U.S. However, when assessing our troops and armaments, they assumed the war would be over before we were all at full capacity, as they knew our women would not be able to fill the manufacturing needs of war. It just never occurred to them that American women could step up and replace men in factories. Really? Through the extremely hard work of our tough and beautiful women, they were able to supply the U.S. military with 17 aircraft carriers, 297,000 aircrafts, 193,000 artillery pieces, plus 86,000 tanks and 2 million trucks in only 4 years. American industrial production, already the world's largest, doubled in size. From the film The War, directed by Ken Burns and Lynn Novick, quote, war production profoundly changed American industry. Companies already engaged in defense work expanded. Others, like the automobile industry, were transformed completely. In 1941, there were over 3 million cars made in the U.S. Only 139 were made the rest of the war. Chrysler made fuselages, General Motors made airplane engines, guns, trucks, and tanks. Packard made Rolls-Royce engines for the British Air Force. End quote. I really want to highlight this paragraph. Hitler bet against American women, and again, he was wrong. Also, see the film At the Ford Plant in Ypsilanti, Michigan. The Ford Motor Company did something like a miracle every 24 hours. The average Ford car had some 15,000 parts. The B 24 Liberator long range bomber had 1,550,000 parts. Ready? One bomber came off the line every 63 minutes. Again, who were the mind numbing dunces that called us out and wanted to face us in battle? Hitler and Hirohito? You two insult the letter H. So, while the Axis commanders, generals, and leaders were completely convinced, that there was no chance, no way that our munition supply could be maintained, the hidden army proved them wrong again. Female employment in defense industries grew by 462% from 1940 to 1944. Between 1940 and 1945, the overall female workforce again grew by 50%. At the height of the war, 19,170,000 women were skilled laborers. How stupid that the Axis idiots thought our women, when called upon, would just sit around. Has Hitler or his henchmen ever gotten anything right? Nurses. Here in the US, we celebrate National Nurses Day and National Nurses Month, and by extension, show gratitude to the nurses in World War II, abroad and domestically. Again, the Axis countries didn't think our women could handle anything above applying bandages, let alone the blood and gore of being field nurses. Abroad, these brave nurses were put in precarious locations and, in most cases, had to help build and set up field hospitals. In a normal hospital setting at the time, one nurse tended to 3 or 4 patients. In the field, one nurse tended to 8 to 10 patients, with a violent mortality rate and a high number of wounded. Despite long shifts and few breaks, they were outstanding and demonstrated grace under pressure. The nurses back home had it very rough too, as soldiers who needed more attention came home. I read a lot of tragic stories these nurses had to deal with, but there was one extremely important assignment they always had to carry out, and I doubt I could have handled it as well. It was doing everything possible to make sure no patients ever saw them cry. Can you imagine all the horrors they saw and stories they heard and people who died in front of them without tears? Our nurses were indoctrinated to keep morale as high as possible, and they did. It didn't get easy for any of them over time, but they knew what the effects on the wounded soldiers would be, so they didn't. Of course, when they finally got off their long shifts, they would go back to their bunks and let it out. But these women, these American women, were kind, tender, sensitive, and very, very tough. We were fortunate that the psycho in Germany who bet against them lost again. It's a prime distinction between dictatorships and democracies. Can you think of any dictatorship that treat their women as equals? I just have to grin when I think about the soldier in Germany who had to write up reports regarding the US rearmament production when it was being done by our women and then hand that report to Hitler. Our women wouldn't step up. Wrong, moron, wrong. I'll add a bit more about the resolve of our men and women. The United States, like all countries, has its up and downs, disagreements, dissensions, socioeconomic divisions, and more. However, we collectively come together when called upon. This is true going back to the American Revolution. Our country was founded by kicking England's overwhelming force out of the country, out of our country. In World War I, Germany antagonized their enemies as it released U-boats on civilian ships. But when World War I ended on November 11th, 1918, we had kicked the crap out of anything put in front of us. When victory was announced, the U.S. had 4.7 million soldiers in total and 2.8 million overseas. You would think the Germans would have learned from World War I, but nope. They made the same fatal misjudgments about our men and women once again in World War II. Same song, second verse. Are you convinced now that Hitler was a Dummkopf who mismanaged everything in his path? Or do you need to see more lies, deceptions, and murders? Now that I've had the time to think about it, you may not want to make this into a drinking game. I had a friend come over to test it out, and he got expedited cirrhosis. I don't want that on my conscience. I would like to highlight he did make it to the fourth paragraph on the introduction page, though. From any logical or strategic military viewpoint, how could anyone discount the effectiveness of women rearming the U.S. military at any level? I think the Nazis assumed American women could supply or resupply our soldiers at a 10%, maybe a 20% rate. Our nurses not being able to handle or stomach war. Yawn. Next question, idiot. I got to hand it to Hitler and the Nazis about being consistent. No matter the topic, issue, or opinion, they were always wrong. Frankly, it's quite impressive. Thank you.